So welcome to the meeting for National Future Energy Leaders Armenia. Today we are joined by Rudolf Yeganyan. Rudolf is a new member of NFEL. He's also a consultant and researcher at Compatible Climate Growth, which is a UK program that looks into facilitating investment in sustainable energy and transport in the developing countries. Rudolf will be presenting today on the topic of open source energy modeling tools developed in particular by Compatible Climate Growth. And he will be sharing the different tools that are available. These are available in open access and everyone can learn them. So I will pass the microphone, so to speak, to Rudolf. If you want to start sharing your screen, let's check that it's all right.
Thank you very much for that, Armen. Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can see them.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Armen. So hi, everyone. My name is Rudolf Yeganyan. I'm a consultant and research assistant at the Climate Compatible Growth Program. And today's presentation will be on open source energy modeling tools. Before beginning the presentation, I just want you to be advised that firstly, the presentation will not be Armenia focused. So it's just a presentation on open source energy modeling tools. A few aspects regarding Armenia will be involved in it, but not that many. And the second aspect is that this material is funded by UK aid from the UK government. However, views expressed here do not necessarily reflect the government's official policies. Right, so the presentation structure is as follows. Firstly, I'll talk to you about energy systems modeling, after which we'll dive down into energy modeling tools. And in the end, I'll talk to you about the Open Learn collection, which is where you can learn how to utilize these tools and find them in open access. Just a disclaimer, I specialize in Osmosis and FlexTool, specifically Osmosis. With the rest of the tools, I have familiarity, but for any, let's say, deep knowledge, you would need to go and look it up yourself on the Open Learn collection, which I'll show to you later. Right, so to begin with, energy systems modeling starts off in energy planning. What is energy planning? Energy planning is about finding trade-off solutions and dealing with future uncertainties. So in terms of price and availability of primary resources, technology development, government commitments, and growth of demand. Comprehensive energy planning is therefore crucial to ensure sustainable growth and can play an essential role in informing decision-making in different ways. Now, energy modeling or energy systems modeling is the process of mathematically analyzing an energy system using computer programs to inform energy policy development in a comprehensive, transparent, and evidence-based manner. Essentially, energy systems modeling enables policymakers and professionals alike to better conduct energy planning activities. How do energy system models help energy planning? They do so by firstly assisting in finding optimal domestic resource allocation by analyzing resource availability and resource use. Energy models also help in assessing policy measures' effectiveness by comparing different policy outcomes and structures. Furthermore, the models assist in comparing different system configurations without incurring the upfront cost of building them, along with mitigation of uncertainty. By assessing compliance with environmental constraints and climate objectives, energy models ensure that such objectives are accounted for and not neglected. By assessing financial viability and investment requirements, energy models help in depicting what is possible and what is not financially possible, and how projects can be actualized. And lastly, by incorporating social and public acceptance of a technology change, energy models ensure that public opinion is accounted for. So to show you where energy modeling fits, this is, let's say, a process of going from data to policy processes and concessionary screening that we at CCG encourage and use. So the process would be to start off from data, which would go down to data pipelines, where through different methodologies data is processed. Starter data kits are essentially databases that can be used. This is a product of CCG that we offer open source, which I can talk to you about later if you would like to. And this presentation, so today's presentation, fits in step number 4. So that's application and analysis, which is the process of using the energy modeling tools in order to come up with solutions. And from those solutions, you dive into policy processes or concessionary finance screening. So today's presentation focuses on number 4, and later on I can talk to you about the other steps if you would like so. Right, so energy modeling tools. So energy models can be categorized and classified based on many different parameters, such as the mathematical program used, the modeling methods, or the outcomes. In the diagram on the screen, the energy models are classified based on their outputs. Essentially, from the output perspective, energy models can focus on system operations, on engineering design, or policy development. The first two have the system feasibility and the energy efficiency of the system as outputs. These types of models focus more on the actual functioning of a system in terms of a system being able to produce electricity and how systems can be improved. So in this diagram, these are the gray and the blue ones. I'll be focusing on the orange ones, the ones of policy development. Energy policy models emphasize the use of natural resources, the greenhouse gas emissions, and the cumulative cost, assessing ways in which future energy production can be envisioned. Energy policy models can be further split up depending on how extensively the system is represented. So over here, you can see that the system splits up into electricity sector and the energy system. Electricity just purely focuses on power. Energy system focuses on transport, electricity, and the heating system. And then energy system models can also be further split up into top-down and bottom-up models. The focus is going to be on the bottom-up models. Just to give you the difference between top-down and bottom-up models, top-down or macroeconomic energy models are driven by projections of economic indicators, such as energy prices. These models are used for analysis that focus on the broad relationships between economic development and energy demand and supply. Such models do not usually focus on detailed representation of technologies and are constructed using econometric tools. In contrast, bottom-up energy models focus on the physical configuration of energy systems, representing technologies with a high level of detail, including their performance and cost parameters and environmental impacts. Such models often use an externally determined energy demand, which may be provided by a top-down model. The most common bottom-up energy models are optimization models. So then, in terms of the bottom-up open source energy models that I'll be talking to you about today, these are the following. So EBS and MADE, Onset, Osmosis and FlexTool, Muse, Fimplan, Clues, and Nismod. So these are all tools that are available open source for free. The tools were developed by the organizations and universities that you see on the slide. Now, what must be acknowledged is the frame of effort, as these tools are provided in a wider context of community engagement of international partners to create a common public good. The organizations are very different in terms of their structure and their agendas. However, by working collectively, the tools have been provided to serve the same purpose, assisting policy development in economically less developed countries. Right, so now over to the tools. The first tools that I'll be talking about is Energy Balance Studio, EBS for short, and Model for Analysis of Energy Demand, MIDE. Both of these were developed by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Energy Balance Studio is a tool for understanding what data is needed and what is not for energy balance formulation. It is used for identifying relevant missing data, structuring the data and mapping the flows of energy products from supply and conversion to final consumption, forming a framework for obtaining and creating energy balances, and building country-specific data sets. Put simple, EBS is an effective tool for providing a systematic framework in organizing the energy statistics that can be used for constructing inputs for energy planning models like MIDE and MESSAGE. Essentially, EBS assists in countries being able to correctly obtain data that can be used for modeling purposes and other purposes. So lifting off the reliance on international organization data. The model for analysis of energy demand is suitable for considering and capturing specifics of energy planning in developing countries. It uses a simulation-based approach where you can build scenarios based on different assumptions. This includes such things as economic growth trajectories, emphasis on industry or agriculture, or development in rural areas. It is based on the disaggregated end-use scenario methodology, meaning that the different sectors for energy use are split up on differing levels. For example, for households, you can provide the energy demand for cooking, heating, cooling, lighting, and appliances. Similar for services, for let's say transport, the demand can be modeled by different modes of transportation, like trains, boats, trucks, different types of cars. MIAD is suitable for modeling the impact of alternative policies for energy use. For example, the impact of investing in individual car use or mass transit, in electricity, or in direct use of fossil fuel. It allows you to evaluate the impact of technological development, such as how improvements in efficiency of end-use equipment may impact future demand. Finally, MIAD can be used to model the effect of changes in lifestyle of society. For example, how increasing the income in households will shape demand. So from EBS and MIAD, the focus is on data and energy demand analysis. The output of these models, however, can be taken a step further, and we can begin to analyze off-grid and on-grid energy production. This brings us to Onset, developed by the KTH Royal Institute of Technology. Onset is a geographical informative system-based tool for developing electrification investment scenarios. It identifies a least cost plan for universal electrification through a mix of grid network extensions, mini-grid systems, and standalone systems. It incorporates in a spatially explicit manner resources, infrastructure, technologies, and demand. So essentially, Onset is the tool you'd want to use to be able to see how through grids, electricity access and electricity just dispersion can be delivered in a country. To show this as an example, this is the type of analysis that Onset can do. And this has been done for the case of Kenya, and this is on the Global Electrification Platform. You're welcome to visit the website to see other analyses that have been done. And essentially here you can see that based on population and where most electricity is used, what type of grids there can be, whether demand and supply are met, and different scenarios of electrifying a set country. So this, in this case, this was done for Kenya, and it has been done on many other countries. Now, suppose that we don't want to analyze just electricity networks and energy access, but whole energy systems. That would take us to the next tool, which is OSeMOSYS. OSeMOSYS is an energy modeling system tool used to support long-term capacity expansion planning. OSeMOSYS was designed to have a modular structure. This means that it is structured in standalone blocks that can be added or removed. This diagram shows the 7 core blocks of OSeMOSYS. As shown here, OSeMOSYS focuses on detailed representation of technologies and flows in the energy system, considering performance, cost, resource use, and environmental impacts. Like other bottom-up models, OSeMOSYS models are driven by an externally determined demand. So these are essentially the core blocks upon which all of the boxes that you see over here can be included in an OSeMOSYS model. Now, to put simply, what OSeMOSYS does is the following. It defines existing technologies. So let's say if we were going to talk in the case of Armenia, it would define the nuclear power plant, hydropower plants, and gas stations. And it would also define new potential options that could work in a country. So let's say a new nuclear power plant, biomass plant, and let's say an oil-based technology, right? What then OSeMOSYS does is uses these technologies to calculate the most cost-efficient manner of meeting a demand defined by the user. So what one could do is take MIAD, for example, build an energy demand for a country, so a scenario for an energy demand, and then put this into OSeMOSYS with a set of technologies to see what's the cheapest way of meeting the energy demand given the technologies in hand. What can be done further is that specific policy objectives can be constrained to the model to see the effect of this on energy production. So for example, one could put a constraint that a country needs to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. You could model this using OSeMOSYS and see what sort of an energy system could be used, in the cheapest energy system, in fact, in order to meet a demand given the constraint of meeting net zero in 2050. For the Armenian audience, I just want you to be aware that OSeMOSYS is very similar to the TIMES model of the IAEA that was used to develop Armenia's energy strategy up to 2040. The only difference is that there's a few constraints that are different between the two models that can be done, and Osmosis was offered as open source. So just to show you an example of what Osmosis can do, this is the least cost scenario for the Armenian electricity system. So here you can see that from 2015 to 2050, these are the different technology mixes. The dark blue represents a nuclear power plant, the red represents gas-fired power plants, so CCGTs, and the light blue represents hydropower plants. So over here, given the demand that was defined, the model found it cost optimal that at this period where the nuclear shuts down, new gas-fired powered plants are built instead. So that's the cheapest way for Armenia to meet its energy demand. Now, let's say that we created a scenario like that in Osmosis, so the one for Armenia, right? But we want to see whether this practically would work. So would this energy system be able to meet high demand, off-peak demand? Will there be any curtailment in the energy system? This brings us to the next tool, which is FlexTool, right? Developed by Arena, FlexTool is used to assess flexibilities of existing or potential energy systems. So what FlexTool does is it takes an energy scenario or an existing energy system and assesses it to see whether it actually is able to produce electricity smoothly. It does so in terms of loss of load, balance in the energy system, and sector coupling. So FlexTool is used to assess whether the scenario from Osmosis or any tool alike or in reality actually works. And essentially, this gives you an idea whether investment in certain technologies is realistic or non-realistic for actual functionings of an energy system. Alternatively, instead of using Osmosis, MUSE can be used for long-term energy systems modeling. MUSE helps understand the types of investments that could be made to ensure a sustainable and secure energy system from a global or a national perspective. MUSE uses a novel agent-based methodology to closely simulate the development of energy systems by allowing the analysis and comparison of different scenarios. Since it has an agent-based approach, meaning MUSE models real investors, the behavior of businesses and consumers can be tailored to be appropriate for each investor type in each sector. MUSE finds a price-quantity-based tension between supply and demand to achieve an equilibrium in every sector and every region modeled. So the difference between MUSE and Osmosis is that MUSE manages to take account the actual businesses, so the actual investor, to see how from an agent-based perspective an energy system can be modeled or can be structured. Right, so suppose that from Osmosis or MUSE, a suggestion is being made that, let's say, Armenia in this instance needs to build a new nuclear power plant, right? How can this be actualized? This is where we would use Fimplan. So Fimplan is an analytical tool for facilitating the financial analysis of power projects. It can be used to design a financing package of a power project, to evaluate alternative financing options, or to analyze various financial uncertainties associated with a project. It has other uses too. Fimplan can also be used to analyze the impacts on projects of various fiscal incentives or disincentives adopted by the governments from time to time, such as tax holidays, carbon benefits, or penalties. So Fimplan is an accounting model that allows standard business accounting principles for recognizing, recording, measuring, and reporting excuse me, an entity's financial transactions. Fimplan essentially tackles the problem and planning of building an actual power plant. So in terms of what Fimplan can do, Fimplan may help to design a financial package. For example, it can help ascertain how much equity has to be leveraged, has to be injected in order to arrive at an appropriate leverage. It may answer how much return shareholders may expect. It will quantify the price of power needed to generate a minimum return to shareholders. It may help to answer how sensitive project is to exchange rates. However, Fimplan is a long-term tool and cannot take into account seasonal or monthly factors. Therefore, it cannot be used for day-to-day operation planning of the company. It cannot change a poor economic project into a successful one. It does not predict price of power or rates of interest. They put their inputs into the model. Now, moving away from the type of models that I've been talking to you so far, what if you wanted to include resources and other such factors into your analysis? This would bring on to you to clues, right? So clues, the climate, land, energy, and water systems methodology, is designed for this type of integrated policy assessment. Clues is a tool for simultaneous consideration of issues pertaining to food, energy, and water security. It provides a means to analyze and assess the interlinkages that exist among energy, water, and agricultural systems, as well as their impacts and vulnerability to climate change. By comparing different technologies and value chains, clues can be used to identify pressure points and indicate synergies and trade-offs to reach development goals. It can help analyze policy decisions on issues such as greenhouse gas emission reductions, competition for water, climate resilience, land use change, and agricultural modernization. Clues models incorporate a representation of the physical systems, both natural resources and the human infrastructure built to harness these resources. It is a methodology, not a tool, and various tools such as OSmosis can be used for clues methodology analysis. So just to show you how this incorporation works, imagine a reference energy system. So a simple energy system like this, right? So you have your coal mine, gas field, water resource, and land. These are respectively used for coal power plants, gas power plants, water treatment, and maize farming. And then in the end, you get your outputs in terms of drinking water, household nutrition, or industrial equipment. Now, let's say water, right? Water is used for drinking water, but at the same time is used in coal power plants, gas power plants, and maize farming. So clues allows you to take into account the amount of water resource available to realistically be able to say, let's say if you were building an energy system, how much water can be used by an energy system. Same goes with land. Let's say your country is a small country. Clues allows you to take into account the amount of land available to say how much space there is to build, let's say, solar capacity. We're aware that solar capacity requires a lot of land, at least to be able to generate a lot of electricity. So clues allows you to take that into consideration to see how much of, let's say, your land can be devoted to solar power plants. Finally, besides energy, infrastructure is also a key component necessary for functioning of any economy and vital for coherent energy functioning. And this brings us to Nismod. Nismod is an evidence-based infrastructure development and modeling tool capable of analyzing and planning national infrastructure. It allows decision makers to evaluate current infrastructure performance, risks, and interdependencies, test different infrastructure development strategies, analyze their outcomes, and chart the best way forward. Nismod can be applied to all networked infrastructure systems, so energy, transportation, water, waste, and digital communications. To just give you a brief difference, or essentially a table showing the differences among the tools, here you can see how the tools vary from one another. So in terms of scope, most of the tools are quite big, except for Fimplan, which focuses specifically on projects. So Fimplan you'd use to do the financial analysis and accounting for any type of power plant, but you couldn't do it on a country scale or a region scale or a city scale. In terms of actual focus of the tools, most tools focus on at least two types of things between energy resources and infrastructure, with the exception being EBS and MAID, which are just purely down to energy, and Nismod, which is infrastructure. And in terms of output, most tools offer both scenarios of potential scenarios where countries can move into and some sort of assessment of the feasibility of these scenarios. Right, now having spoken to you about all the tools, all of these tools, as mentioned previously, are available for free on the OpenLearn collection, right? So all of the tools with courses on how to use them are provided on the OpenLearn collection. These courses are designed to be self-taught. So The way that we've done them at CCG with various partners is to provide you with self-teaching material that will enable you to understand the basic fundamentals of how to use any of these tools. On completion of the courses on the OpenLearn, you will receive a certificate. So that's something that can be used later for employment or other purposes. And yeah, and essentially these courses are hosted on the Open University platform. Along with the courses, we at CCG offer training events of the said tools. So there were 2 training events that were conducted in 2021, last year, the ICTP Joint Summer School and the Energy Modeling Platform for Africa. This year, we will be conducting the same events, and the applications are now open for the ICTP Joint Summer School. The training is set to begin on the 30th of May, and applications will close on the 1st of May. In order to apply, you're required to complete the course of the tool that you would like to learn more on and submit your certificate as a part of the application. To find out more, you can visit the Climate Compatible Growth page on LinkedIn or on Climate Compatible Growth website, or you can contact me through LinkedIn. And these were the references that were used in making this lecture. I'll just pause here for a second so that in the video they can be captured. Cool, so thank you for listening. And if you have any questions regarding any of the tools or the training that we offer or any of the material, feel free to ask them now. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Rudolf, for this presentation. It was quite a lot of material, but you went through it rather quickly. So to those of you who joined a bit late, just to remind, we are recording this and this will be available on YouTube on NFEL page. And some people asked about sharing the slides through email with registered participants. We will do that as well. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand or type it in the chat. And we have the next 30 minutes or so to answer the various questions on the modelings, because there are quite a lot of models that we covered. And Rudolf, if you want, actually, I was thinking if you can go back to sharing the screen on the slide, which was comparing the different models. Sure. I think that will be a good reminder for people to see what questions they want to ask.
So I'll just leave this screen on so that there's just a bit of context. There's a raised hand, I'm seeing.
Yeah, we have a question from Olga Bogdanova, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, first of all, for your insightful and very constructive presentation, a lot of information to think about. I wanted to ask, as well, probably not that everyday user of models, I used to participate in modeling process, but more on theoretical basis, like preparing the content of the models. But regarding those open source model tools, I wanted to ask whether there is a tool as such available on the internet. I mean, some kind of IT program or web where you put the data in. And if there is such a, well, practically place where to put the data and those variable data information and the entry information, maybe it is possible to show it, demonstrate somehow, just to see it in life. Or if we decide to test something, what should we do then?
Sure. So all of these tools are available for free for you to download, right? I'll just go and show you where you can find them. And also in terms of data, what I'll do is I'll show you this thing called starter data kits, right? So these are data kits that were developed by CCG on a few countries. And you can, like, the method of how these data were developed and how you can recreate them is shared as well, open source. So you're welcome to go and look at that as well. What I'll do is I'll just share my screen, not as the portion, but as the whole, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Right. I think you should be able to see my screen now. Yeah?
Yeah, we can see the Google.
Cool. So if you type Open Learn Collection into Google, you'll get this, the very first thing that says Collections Open University. All right, and if you go over here and you scroll down, you will find climate compatible growth, right? So it's the same logo as the one on the presentation. And we'll also share the link over here down at in the chat as well in a bit, so that you have access to that too. So going over here, you will find all of the courses on the different tools, right? And when you go into the courses, so let's say if I was going to go into energy and flexibility modeling, and I go to course content, there is these lectures and hands-on exercises. In the hands-on exercises, like in every single course, essentially, the first hands-on exercise is how you install the tool that you want to use. So if I went over here, it would just show me the instructions on how to install the software necessary for using Osmosis. If this just loads so that you can see. Right, whilst this is loading, I'll show you something else. And this is the data that I mean. So if you go onto the Climate Compatible Growth website, and over here on outputs, there's a link saying starter data kits. Yeah, my internet is being a bit slow, apologies for that. So all the countries where you see that there is some sort of a color next to it, there's data kits. So essentially data with all the necessary Excel files with all the necessary data that you would need in order to do energy modeling analysis for the said countries over here, right? And if you scroll down over here, you see the data sets and the preprint. So this contains all the information on where the data were collected from, how the data was constructed, what are the assumptions behind the data, and essentially how you can rebuild your own data, right? So let's say if you wanted to do the exact same analysis for, I don't know, Spain, which doesn't have a data set, right? You could come over here, look how it was been done for other countries and go and replicate the same, because all the data was gathered from international sources. So IEA or World Bank or places like that. So essentially you can do the exact same thing. And as for the tools, it's just over here. This is not opening because I need to download it in order to show it to you. But yeah, so if you go on those websites, you will find all the relevant material. What I'll do now is I'll just reshare the old screen and send the links back over there. Does that answer your question, Olga?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So the idea is that we find it out and we download it, and there will be that technical tool, which actually some of countries do have the data, some should, well, for some countries we should, well, include the data, but we can use the methodology, but actually the tool as such is available on those web pages. That's to summarize. Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Perfect, no worries. I'll just reshare the old screen and yeah.
Okay, we have another question from Shant Gregorian. If you want to go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much for the presentation. I will just start where the last question ends. So regarding the data, I see in the list there is no mention of some countries, and I mean here Armenia, for example, how to get such data, or at least an overview.
Right. So thank you for the question, Shant. Armenia's dataset is actually being developed by me, right? So that's going to be uploaded there later on in the year. But in order to show you how anyone could develop such a data kit, right? Let me just, I'm going to have to go back and forth through sharing the screen. There is a paper that we have published from CCG that lists the exact steps that you would take in order to build a data set, right? So let me just remember what exactly it was called, because that's the problem that I had with it last time. And I'll just share the link over here as well. But essentially, it highlights the exact steps of where you can find the data and how you can manipulate the data in a way where you can use it for energy modeling. So EBS is also one of the tools that you can learn how to use, and through that create some of the data. But this also shows you how you can do it otherwise. So just give me 1 second, I'll find it and I'll send it over. The one for Armenia is being developed, though, so no worries about that. It will be soon available. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let me just reshare my screen. Can you see? Yeah, so this paper, it's on Research Square now. It's out for publication to be admitted into Elsevier, if I recall correctly. And this paper literally lists the steps of how you would build a starter data kit. So the exact same data kits as the ones over here. So it's literally a step-by-step guide with the links, with where the data is taken from and how you can replicate the exact same process. So you end up with a data set that has all of the relevant information and more, basically. I'll send this over in the chat as well. Does that answer your question?
My first one, I have a second one.
Go ahead.
In these tools, is there, I mean, is wind energy also embedded?
Yeah, no, you can model it up to yourself. So for example, in OSMOSYS, right? Let's say that the model that I showed you before, the picture of that had wind technologies as well in it, but it did not find it cost effective to use wind technologies. You can include as many technologies as you want in OSMOSYS. You can include whatever you can find data on, essentially, and then you see how the model reacts to it.
I think we have a
Thank you very much.
I think we have a follow-up from Olga Bogdanova.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to ask once more. Just listening to your explanations, I've got another question. You said that, well, there are a lot of, actually you demonstrated also on your screen that there are a lot of different countries where those modelings were already done with the data. I wanted to ask, from your experience, are those assumptions for the countries, how the model just inside, proceeds the data and then comes with a outcome of their modeling or forecast. It doesn't matter what's the results in a certain case, but those assumptions, are they the same for each country?
No.
Or they differ?
No, they differ. They're very country and context specific, right? So for example, in certain countries, it would be unrealistic to think of certain technologies as being a potential deployment technology, right? Because it would just not make sense, or the data as well. Like, let's say in the data gathering period, some countries have much more electricity access or connections or grid networks than others. So the way they've been done is it's not exactly the same. There's been some context taken into it, but all of these ones that are available over here, so all the countries over here, the idea is that this is just a starting point, right? So at the end of the day, like, let's say if someone was going to collect the data for Armenia, the best person who would probably do it is an Armenian that knows the energy sector, right? So relying on international organizations to do that is somewhat incoherent. So what CCG has done is develop these as a starting point for local researchers to take and to develop it further. So to make it more country specific, to check the assumptions, to change them, to do whatever they want with them. It's just a starting point.
Oh, well, thanks a lot for this explanation. And well, is the idea that all the data researcher or the team of researchers enters, it remains in that global network then? Is that the idea, that we develop that database, if I can say so, of the models? Or it's like you download it on your laptop and this is a model you play with and nobody sees?
It's up to you, because the idea is to take these data sets, develop them further, turn it into something that is actually going to be impactful and use it, right? So let's say for the case of one project that I can talk about is Kenya, right? In Kenya, the data set has been downloaded, is being used and worked with the Kenyan Energy Ministry to develop a model, right? Whether this model ends up being published in the end for others to look at or not, I don't know. It might be the case or it might not. But it's just to promote research and to promote this growth of open source knowledge. We do encourage that whoever uses this also re-uploads the material. Like, let's say if somebody took the data set for Egypt, improved it, and told us, you know what, I've improved it and it's a lot better, we would upload it. We would update that. So it's to anyone who wants to go and develop it further and see something useful come out of this. Essentially, that's the idea.
I see. Thanks a lot. But well, in this case, if, for example, our team of researchers decided to use a tool and upload the data from Latvia, from Riga, so to upload the data for Riga, is there someone who is going to review the data, or it's going to be like reflected as data of this climate compatible growth?
No. It will be given to, like, let's say if you are the one that goes and makes it, right? And then you come to us and you tell us, I've collected the data, I've created a starter data kit for Latvia and would like to get it published. In the publication, it will be your name, not us, like that, because that's your work. That's not our work, you know?
Okay, but is there any kind of, well, I'm asking, well, so is there someone who looks through all those, well, proposed, I would say, data by researchers, just to check assumptions, because they might differ from country to country, just to be sure that the approach is more or less, of course, they cannot deep dive, as you mentioned, it's important to be a local expert in order to reflect the best data, but is there someone who, well, looks through and like checks that the approach is more or less the same?
Yeah, so that's the idea is that you would follow this, right? So this paper literally lists the exact steps you would take. And then afterwards, you would say, you came to us, you said, I've developed it for Latvia. Can somebody have a look through? Would want to get it up? Yeah, someone would check it for sure.
Oh, great. Thank you.
No worries. Let me just share all these links. Armen, if you can just give me 1 second before so that I can just share all the links so that people have access to them on the chat, and then we can go over to the next question.
Yeah, sure. So while we're waiting to see if anyone has any additional questions, I will spice things up a little bit. So Rudolf, these tools are open source, and that's obviously quite different from other models that you have to pay for, such as Times Markov. So how do these tools compare to the ones that are not open source? If you have any information on that, and what is the reason that CCG decided to provide this for free?
All right, yeah, that is a good question to spice it all up. So the idea is the following, right? Essentially, with the Markov and Times, the tools have differences in terms of some time settings that you can do. So in terms of the amount of, let's say, time slices you can capture in a year. So this is just in terms of osmosis, and a few parameters here and there. So Times has a bit more parameters on certain aspects. Osmosis has a bit more parameters on other aspects. Essentially, down, like if you go down to the bottom of it, they do the exact same thing. It's not like they do something very different to each other. Why did the climate compatible growth do this in the first place? It's because, so in economically less developed countries, there is always the tendency that analysis or consultancies, right, are done by big international organizations which do not have the country-specific knowledge, right? So, for example, let's say in the case of Armenia, there's analysis that's been done by USAID, which I'm not aware whether it was local experts who did it or whether it was American experts who did it. But the country specifics in terms of due to language barriers, due to just information passing from one point to the other, and so on and so forth, not always, but a lot of the time it ends up being the case that it is not accurate, right? So what CCG does is it wants to encourage research to happen locally. So for local country experts to develop their own tools, to do their own analysis and come up with their own policies. And it's essentially providing the tools for that for free so that one can do it. You can come onto the CCG page, learn how to use the tools, gather your data and do the analysis on your own, and then see what comes out of it. And the idea is just so that less economically developed countries are not as reliant on international organizations for publishing a report every 5 years saying what they should do, but they can do their own analysis. And CCG also acknowledges that in many countries, sometimes the funds for some of these tools are not available or for training, and that's why essentially we do it for free. So just as a public good. So moving away, CCG tries to move away within the energy knowledge sphere, at least, from that closed paid, let's say, area into open source knowledge. And we are seeing a lot of organizations work with us. So half of these tools were provided by, again, international organizations who are doing the training and all of that also for free. So there's a lot of movement in this just to promote local research, because it's always more accurate and more realistic than when research is done by a third member who just doesn't know all the information. Because you can't compare someone who, let's say, is born in Armenia, studied in Armenia, knows Armenian, and worked in the energy sphere doing a modeling analysis to a person in America who just looked at a project for 6 months. Like, you can't compare the outcomes that would come from that. The one in Armenia will for sure know a lot of more things than the one in America, and that goes for any country essentially. So yeah, that's how I would answer that question. And I'm just about to share the last link as well.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Rudolf, for the very useful presentation. Oh wait, we have a last minute jump in from Shant Krekorian. If you want to go ahead, Shant.
Yes, can you please give more insight on this summer school, if possible? Thank you.
Sure. So the summer school will be held online, right? It's going to be a 3-week training course, and in order to be accepted to the summer school, you would need to go onto the link that I've sent you on Open Education, on Open Learn, and complete whatever tool you'd want to learn more about. So complete the course and get a certificate in the end, and then you apply to the summer school. And in the summer school, essentially for 3 weeks, first week we teach a lot of in-depth analysis on how to use the tools properly. So you would get, like, let's say, concrete knowledge on how you can use the tools and like all the nuances and specific aspects. So not just an introduction, a lot more into it. So all the specifics about the tools. And afterwards, we get into case studies. So that's when you would actually begin to use the tools as a case study on some country, whether your country or another one, depending on data availability, in order to actually learn how to use the tools and how this can be used for policy development. As well as that, the summer school will offer an induction session within the connection of modeling and political economy, along with a high-level meeting in the end, highlighting essentially biggest problems in the energy sphere in terms of modeling and how modeling can be used in what way to overcome this. This training is offered by trainers from all the organizations that you saw in that slide. So it's people from the IAEA, Imperial College London, World Bank, so on and so forth. And yeah, that's the application deadline is the 1st of May. So you would have need to have completed one of the courses beforehand and uploaded the certificate. And yeah, and any more information you'd want to know, Shant? I'll also send the link to the event over there so that you can see all the specifics about it.
And
thank you very much.
Olga Bogdanova is asking if you know whether the courses of the summer school are organized in the evening or during the daytime.
Right, so they will be organized. It depends actually on what tool you want to learn, right? Because the times for that will be organized by different organizations, but they're usually during the daytime, right? So in order to participate in the summer school, you would need to have some approval from if you're working from your boss or something, saying that they're happy for you to attend, essentially, that you will dedicate time to this. So yeah, they are done during working hours, if that's the question. And I'm just trying to find the link for it to send it to you. Apologies for this, yeah.
Are there any last minute questions? Okay, it looks like no more questions. So if you have any questions pop up later during the day, you can find Rudolf on LinkedIn. We have shared how to subscribe to our YouTube channel in the chat. And also, if you want to join our community and to be registered and to be notified of future events and talks, Also, the link is shared in the chat. So thank you everyone for attending.
Armen, just if you could just give me a minute for me just to share this link real quick.
We'll wait and we'll give people some time to look at the links shared in the chat if they want to.
Yeah, and join. If anyone has any other questions at any point, feel free to contact me. LinkedIn, I'll also drop down my email as well, and you're more than welcome to email me if needed. I'm just finding the link real quick. My internet has not been the greatest today.
We will share the links and the slide presentations with the registered participants through email. So
yeah, that's the link for the event. So you can see all the details over there regarding it, how to apply, what are the different tools, and there's more specifics about the tools with research papers associated with them, so you can see what each tool can do. And my email is the following. Cool, that's all from my side, if no one has any other questions.
No, I think that's it. So again, thank you for attending, register for joining future events, and thank you, Rudolf, again for the very compact and useful presentation.